One thing that continues to become a reoccurring thought for me as I get older is that each day is a precious gift. And I think when you're younger, not that I'm so old, but I am, I guess, older, is when you think of the day that's ahead of you. You might have a plan, you might have certain things you want to accomplish, but the day just kind of goes by, and then another day goes by, and before you know, another week goes by, and then a month goes by, and a year goes by, and we maybe don't take enough time to reflect and consider just how precious each day is. It was a year ago this Sunday that we were affected by COVID, and we initially went to online services for several months before we were able to return at the end of August last year. And as you remember, we were meeting out in the parking lot, and that was a particular blessing, not only because we were able to meet together physically, but it was a great reminder of seeing how the church works together to be able to do what the church does, and that is to have fellowship and to worship, to see so many who came together to set everything up and to tear everything down. But we are still reminded that because of COVID, we haven't seen some people in a year. And though we get to see folks online through video, probably one of the things that is kind of weird is watching the kids grow online. Some of them very small, and over the course of the last year, we've seen them grow. We've had new babies come. We've had also new people come to our church. And so even in the past year, the face of our church has really changed. Obviously, there has been a lot that's happened in our country and around the world. And because of the many issues that have arisen, it's affected even our church. I know there are times where there's probably confusion and difficulty in knowing how to address various issues. And to some degree, and you see this in many churches, these issues have brought division to the church. In fact, people will leave churches over these issues. We have had members leave this church because they don't believe we're doing enough in light of what's going on with COVID, that we're not being open enough, that we're not being bold enough, that we're not being courageous enough. But then on the other hand, we have those who are hesitant and fearful of things that are going on, the possibilities of getting sick. And these are just all realities that we're facing. But the fact is, we haven't seen half our church in over a year. And as a pastor, it's very difficult to know how to navigate these things. There was no class in seminary that said what to do when there's a pandemic. In fact, there are a lot of things in seminary that they don't have a class for. And so I could tell you that for many pastors, we'll sit and talk about these things and just say, what do you do? And it doesn't matter which way you go, you will face criticism and questioning. But the one thing I do know as a pastor is that I am called to shepherd you, and that I'm called to direct you to the truth of God's word and to point you to the person of Christ so that you would look to Christ. Christ is Lord and Savior, not John Kim. Christ is Lord and Savior, not the church. And that's why, if you recall, toward the end of last year, as well as the first few weeks of this month, I really wanted to focus on Christ. In fact, that's why the theme for our year this year is Only Jesus. And in many ways, that focus was really for me, because it's so easy to be stretched and pulled in so many directions, because believe me, I have had so many opinions and challenges thrown my way, and you just go, how do you respond to all these things? You yourself might have your own opinion or preference about things, and you're looking for those things to be accommodated. Well, imagine having to be in a situation where you're listening to multiple opinions and preferences, and you're hearing people say, do this, don't do this, don't do this. And yet there's only one decision you can make in terms of how to move forward. Now, I'll tell you, and I've shared over the past year, there have been particularly difficult stresses and strains. And I'm not alone as well. There are members at our church who are going through deep and painful struggles, trials that are unusually painful. And it takes a toll. It takes a toll on everyone. And even for myself, from week to week, it's almost like it's almost like a ongoing television series where you don't know what's going to happen each week. I know with Netflix you can kind of watch a whole season like in one night, so you know what happens. But real life isn't that way. You don't know what's going to happen from day to day. And for me, sometimes the scary thing is to check my email or to go on social media or to get a text or a phone call. There are literally times I turn off my phone. I don't want to deal with it because I'm afraid of what's coming. And some days it's terrible. You know, there are two particular challenges for me that are maybe the hardest. One is dealing with family. I've shared before, I have a younger brother who is not a believer and at times really attacks me, and it's painful. And I have extended family that hate me, and I am reminded of that at times. So family is one difficult challenge. But the other heartache is church, and to get attacked by former church members or church leaders. And I have, I think, acknowledged I am someone that gets easily discouraged. And when those things happen, it affects me tremendously. And so even this past week, I took a few days to get away to pray and to seek the Lord, to ask Him for grace and perseverance, because you never know what will come. And given the conditions and circumstances for everyone, there's no surprise that the spiritual battle is intense. And the enemy would seek to take advantage of any situation to take your eyes away from Christ. But one of the things in the midst of going through trials and difficulties, and I think this is a real test to see if you trust the Lord, is, are you able to be thankful in the midst of trials? Are you able to show gratitude to God for what He is doing in your life, despite the hardships and the difficulties? Can we, as James 1 says, consider it all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, knowing that even what you are going through, God is using to help shape and mold you. You know, that's something I often need to be reminded of, because I get so fixated on just the hardship and the difficulty, and I just want it to go away. And sometimes I forget that the promises of God's word, if I really believe that God's sovereign and providential care in my life is to help shape me and mold me, even through what others might do, which would be evil and wicked. Like Joseph told his brothers, what you intended for evil, God meant for good. And he was able to have a perspective that even though it had led to his entering into slavery and being in years of test and trial, he was able to say, I see the good that God has worked, like Romans 8:28 promises, for those who believe. And so in the past weeks, there have been things that I have been reminded that God is doing good. Probably the highlight a few weeks ago was when Kara and Vashik shared that they were expecting. That was such good news. That was such good news because in the midst of all the hardships, there was something to look forward to. And even in a very small way, to have this sense of expectation. To know that there is a life that has been set in motion. And I couldn't help but think, and not to overly dramatize it, but when you think about when Mary was told that she was going to bear a child, and she was going to bear the Savior. And to have the anticipation and to look forward to knowing that God is at work. And of course, that was a very unique and special situation. But it was such good news. And I thought, wow, thank you, God. I hope I can stick around long enough to enjoy being a grandfather. Hope I can make it to September. But thank you for that good news. I think one thing that I am particularly reminded that I shared earlier is like when you see little ones, and especially when you're at church, and I think those who know me know that I love seeing the little kids and seeing them grow and seeing them learn to talk and to walk. It's something so precious because in some ways it's a real life illustration of how you see people grow even spiritually. It's slow. Sometimes from week to week you might not see a whole lot, but you see certain steps being taken, certain milestones reached, and you can rejoice in that. Last August when we started meeting outdoors, and as the months went by, if you recall a few months ago, it was really cold out there. Do you remember that? And for those who were in that little walkway underneath the sound team and the music team and those who were preaching, it was really cold. In fact, there was one Sunday where I remember I was so cold and the words were not coming out, and my jaw kind of felt frozen, and I thought, this is not how I imagined doing church. But thank you, Lord, that we can still gather together. I mean, it's not convenient, but people are coming. And it was funny even to see those that would walk by or they drive through that alleyway, and they didn't realize there was a church service going on. And I thought, well, just maybe, even if it was for a few moments, maybe they could hear some truth. Now, in the past year, we've seen all sorts of issues brought to the forefront: social justice, racial hatred, Christian nationalism, the elections, protests, riots, even the recent anti-Asian violence. There are so many things happening around us. And we are challenged as Christians to respond to these things in a way that brings glory to God. And we should not react like the world. The recent arrest of Pastor James Coates in Canada, the ongoing saga with Grace Community Church and John MacArthur provide these very high-profile situations. And you can see people's opinions polarized. And many are quick to draw conclusions over issues. And it's okay. Think about these things. But one thing I would like to really caution you and challenge you is that while there could be a range of opinions on all these matters, and I would welcome civil discussions over these issues, and we can even disagree, hopefully agreeably, without attacking one another, but maybe to take a step back and ask, have you looked at the bigger picture before you look at the particulars? Now look at the particulars. Look at the specific issues. We have a responsibility to deal with them. But don't forget that there's a bigger picture behind all this. And before we look to maybe point out the faults of someone else, do some self-examination. Charles Spurgeon said this: the person who does not like self-examination may be pretty certain that things need examining. And I think that's something that we need to consider. Before you are quick to point out what you might not like about someone else and what they've said, have you taken some time to do some self-examination? And I would like to start with this first premise. What distinguishes the Christian from the world? What distinguishes the Christian from the world? In other words, if you say that you're a Christian, now if you're not, then you're not. But if you say that you're a Christian, that is no small thing. In fact, you are making a statement that says, I am different from the world because of Christ. To be called a Christian means my identity is completely defined by the person of Christ, especially in relation to the world. No longer am I defined by the past and the world. I am defined by Christ. I like what Steve Lawson has to say about this. He says a Christian is one who believes in Christ. He is submitted to Christ. He is surrendered to Christ. He is following Christ. He is living for Christ. His whole life is Christ. Now, I think we all have to just again stop and ask ourselves, is that true for me? If I'm going to do some self-examination, and I look at Scripture, for instance, Philippians 1:21, for to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Does that provide some perspective, especially when you think about the realities of the fact that, you or I might actually die, maybe not just from COVID, but from cancer, from disease, from a car accident, from any number of things that you or I might die at any time. But even our death is meant to be defined by Christ. You see, for the Christian, our goal is not just to stave away death. You see, the ultimate goal for each day is not just to try to stay alive and to hopefully not get sick and so forth. Not to say that you should be irresponsible or reckless. But whether I live or die, Christ defines that for me. In Hebrews 12, verses 1 through 3, it says, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, laying aside every weight and the sin which so easily entangles us, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary, fainting in heart. Now, that particular passage follows chapter 11, where you see what we call the Hall of Faith, and you see the characters, especially those from the Old Testament, who were known for having faith in God, and these by no means were perfect people. In fact, we know their failures and their weaknesses and their struggles, and yet the one thing that defined them was their faith was in God. And that all ultimately points toward us being challenged to then respond. And how do we respond? By fixing our eyes on Jesus. But let's ask this question. What happens if you don't fix your eyes on Jesus? What happens if your eyes turn elsewhere and you start fixing your eyes on something else, namely the things of the world? Well, most likely it will mean then you will not lay aside every weight that distracts. It most likely means that you will easily be entangled by sin. It most likely means you are probably not running the race with endurance, if you're even running the race at all. And it will reveal itself by growing weary and faint of heart. You see, because the only way to combat those things and to respond to those things properly is to fix your eyes on Jesus. Now, why am I sharing all these things with you? I've titled today Pastoral Reflections and Exhortations because as your pastor, I've been thinking about a lot of things. And I am no social commentator. I am no politician. I'm not a specialist in pandemics and all that kind of stuff. But there's one thing I know I do need to do, and that is to shepherd your souls and point you to Christ. If you look across the country, the spiritual vitality of many churches has dropped dangerously low. Why? Because our ability to even meet has been so severely affected. Many churches are barely functioning. And while we understand taking precautions, and we are thankful for live streaming because of technology, there is one thing that's true, and you see this not only for the church, you see this for family and friendships and so forth, that the lack of physical interaction has taken a toll on many people. The isolation, the separation that has now taken place for over a year. You see it in the lack of consistent fellowship and the lack of spiritual accountability. There is this diminishing of spiritual vitality. And the scary thing is this: even if we were to return to on-site physical meetings at some point because we finally get to the place where it's supposed to be safe, I'm afraid that there are patterns and habits that have been built up over the past year that will be very difficult to overcome. Now, I don't know about you, and I mentioned this before. When you go to church online, in some ways it's kind of nice, right? One, you don't have to drive. Two, you don't even have to wash up, right? I mean, you don't even have to change if you really didn't want to. I think I've shared even when I was preaching online, there were times I just wore a suit top just on the top, and I was wearing shorts on the bottom. And for me, that was kind of nice. I don't like wearing suits. I don't like having to dress up. So in some ways, you're like, hey, this is kind of nice. It's more convenient. It kind of makes it easier, and I could just sort of check in, and then I'm done, and I can do whatever else I need to do. I think it's concerning, and I hope it concerns you too, that this is not just about you, but think of your fellow brothers and sisters. Are you concerned about their spiritual life? Do you know that there are folks among you who are struggling desperately? And because of the isolation and separation, we don't even get a chance to have small talk. In fact, some of that small talk is actually pretty meaningful because you're actually able to touch base with real life people. To even just hear someone say your name. Hi, Cody. We don't get to even hear that now, week after week after week. And it does something to your heart and soul. There's 5 questions I want to ask you to consider. And then there's 5 exhortations. And these are short. These are not meant to be something I'll dwell on a long time. But I thought about these questions because I want you to consider these and reflect upon these. First, what happened to the primacy of our Lord and Savior? In other words, what happened to Jesus being first and foremost in our priorities? During the Reformation, you remember the sola statements, and one of them was solus Christus, Christ alone. And at the very heart of the Reformation was to be reminded that, yes, grace alone, faith alone, Scripture alone, but Christ alone. Why was that so critical and important? It's because it wasn't Christ alone The Catholic Church had relegated Jesus into a group with all sorts of other folks involved, whether it was the Virgin Mary or the saints or even the Pope and the cardinals. In other words, Jesus alone was not really something that stood out. But how about for us, even as a church? Paul Washer says this: I don't have a vision except for Jesus Christ. I don't want to be anything. I don't want to be a big shot. I don't want to be important. I don't want to conquer the world. I just want to be pleasing to God today, and that is enough. That is enough, and strive as I might, I haven't obtained that goal, so why should I look for another? I think the problem for many Christians right now is that the vision for Christ is dim. It has been clouded and distracted by looking at other things. In fact, maybe one of the byproducts of having so much time at home and being alone and being on a screen all day is that it has caused you to just think of life that it's all about you. Because you literally don't have to deal with people as much anymore. And if you're an introvert, you don't mind that. I'm kind of an introvert. I don't mind that. Because sometimes it is very inconvenient to deal with people. But when you remove all those people from your life, you have even more time for self-pleasure, self-fulfillment, the pursuit of self-glory, to feed the habits that make it even more accessible for you to practice being self-centered and be self-absorbed. Because you literally have all this time and you only have to be concerned about yourself. Now again, this is not everybody, but this kind of situation has lent itself that way. And when we consider what does it mean to call Jesus Christ Savior and Lord, too many times we look at Jesus as just kind of an accessory. He's kind of, I'll beckon him when I need him, and otherwise, most of the time, Jesus, I'm busy. I got things to do, Jesus. I got a schedule here. I have my agenda for the day. Philippians 2, 9 through 11 says this: Therefore God also highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Now again, if you call yourself a Christian, does calling Jesus Lord really mean what it's supposed to mean? In other words, am I lovingly obedient to the Lordship of Christ during these challenging times? In fact, one of the reasons why I chose the theme Only Jesus, and if you haven't had a chance to pick up a bookmark there in the back table there, but in reflecting on the past year, it's been too easy to be distracted by so many other things. So we're not fixing our eyes on Jesus. And you think not only with COVID, the social justice issues, the elections, the divisions of the church get exposed because of these things. And so that's why I ask, what has happened to the primacy of Christ in our midst? I wonder if somehow that has been set aside. So you need to ask yourself, and not ask someone else, or not be concerned necessarily for someone else first, but you yourself. Anytime you hear that, you yourself, that's a way to just make it emphatic. You see that in Scripture. But do you yourself see the glory of Christ as your greatest concern in all areas of life? Does his lordship extend to every aspect of your life, including how you view social issues, politics, public health policy, the relationship between church and state, and the many other issues that we face during these challenging times? I think it's pretty obvious. We live in a world that is very fallen, and we see corruption, brutality, hatred, These are harsh realities. There is wickedness and evil in our world. But what this world tries to do is to tell you, let me give you the answer. And the answers are all just of this world. And if anything, the world seeks to distort the truth of God's word, to deceive people into questioning and doubting God, and instead follow satanic lies and deceptions, all of which is meant to keep people blinded to the glory of the gospel of Jesus Christ and to keep everyone's eyes fixed on this world. We minimize our obedience to Christ because we excuse ourselves and often compare ourselves to others instead of looking to follow Christ. You see, maybe for some you indulge in sin and worldliness, and you give in to fleshly desires that come your way, figuring it doesn't matter because, you know what, everyone's doing it anyway. It's not a big deal. But then there are others who would feel that they are doing better than others. They're quick to judge and measure others against their own self-righteousness, kind of like the older brother against his prodigal younger brother. And instead of being in loving submission to Christ, they celebrate their own self-righteousness. There are many ways to be rebellious and disobedient to Christ. But the primary issue is this: are you living in submission to the Lordship of Christ in your life? Or are you excusing yourself because of the circumstances or because of others, how you might measure them? Or maybe even just because of the inconveniences that our current situation brings. I want to exhort you to stop. And instead of looking around you, look up to the one who died and rose again on your behalf. We can't afford to be living for ourselves when we've been called to live for the one who died and rose again on our behalf. That's the first question. Second question: why are Christians choosing the temporal over the eternal? Why are Christians choosing the temporal over the eternal? A.W. Tozer said this: the more fascinated we become with the toys of this world, the more we forget that there's another world to come. I'm 55. I'm hoping I get maybe 10 to 20 more years. I can't imagine even living past that. My body's already so racked up. I can't even imagine living. I don't know how I would handle that. But let's say God is gracious and I get to live even longer, maybe to 70 or 80. 90 just would be too long. But the reality is, life will be over at some point. That means everything in this world is going to pass away at some point, especially in relation to me. I do not have eternal life here on this earth. Death will come. But not only that, this world will end. That's what Scripture says. The things of this world will pass away. So it doesn't make sense for those who have eternal life to choose that which is temporal over the eternal. In recent weeks, a well-known pastor declared that he would no longer consider himself evangelical and rather would align with the woke camp. Now, to some degree, I understand why, because we see all the injustice and the hatred and all the suffering and oppression that happens in our world. It is a reality. But here's the problem with all of that. What is the solution? And the problem with seeking temporal fulfillment is simply this: the doctrine of total depravity guarantees you that there will be no perfect solution in this world. We will never experience perfect peace. We will never experience perfect unity. We will never experience perfect forgiveness, because in this world it is fallen. There is a corruption, a perversion, an inability to bring about these things. Ultimately, this world is in love with this world and the things of the world. And the love of God is not in those who love the world. Yes, we live in this world, but we're not called to be of this world. 1 John 2:15 and following says this, "Do not love the world nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away and also its lust, but the one who does the will of God abides forever." Now let me address a very delicate issue. And this might make you uncomfortable. Is your concern for your physical health and well-being the ultimate determining factor that governs all your decisions for life? And again, I want to reiterate, I am not advocating to be reckless, to be irresponsible regarding our health. But would we make our physical well-being such a priority that it displaces all other priorities to the point where it actually affects the real-time living out of our spiritual priorities to the detriment of our spiritual health? Could it be that we love physical health more than anything else to the point where it becomes an idol? Here's another thought to consider. Might I be actually a closet health, wealth, prosperity adherent? We would say never. No, we are dedicated to a high view of God and His Word, and we want to live life that would honor Christ. This world is passing away. We will also pass away. But for someone who places such a high priority on the things of the world, you need to ask yourself, is that what's governing my life? And how long will it last? How long can we afford to let these kind of things dictate how we live? In 1 John 2 there, when it says the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life, I want to highlight on that middle one, where it talks about the lust of the eyes, because I think there's something particularly challenging these days with how we view things. The internet and video world has more than enough content. We could be on 24/7 looking at all these things, watching all of these shows and movies. We can be doing so much, and we still would never be able to exhaust all that is out there. But here's the question. In spending so much time fixing your eyes on things, what are you feeding your heart? Psalm 101 verse 3 says, "I will set no vile thing before my eyes." That word vile means worthless. It's also the idea of being unprofitable in addition to being wicked or morally objectionable. Psalm 119:37 says this, "Cause my eyes to turn away from looking at worthlessness and revive me in your ways." Now here's the challenge, and I admit I am guilty of this too, because I've shared with you. I watched Cobra Kai, okay? I've watched it several times. I would probably watch it again a few more times. It's like every time you watch it, you find out more details that you didn't catch the first time. But that's a lot of time. Maybe for you, it's, you're following your favorite celebrities, singers, YouTube influencers, and, you spend all this time. And yet we struggle, and I want to be careful. It's not just to give you a guilt trip on this, but when you look at it and to compare, we struggle with reading our Bibles for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And you ask, what are you setting your eyes on? Are we setting our eyes on things that are worthless and useless, and we don't see the corresponding effect that it would have then? What it shows is that we have given so much time to the temporal and not to the eternal. Psalm 119:18 says this, "Open my eyes that I may behold wonderful things from your law." We have to show some discernment over what we set our eyes on. Vodi Bakum says this: no matter how good things get in this world, it's all Egypt. There will never be enough gold chains, fine linen, praise, adoration, or anything else to satisfy the yearning that God has placed in us. Only his presence in the land of promise will satisfy his people. I mean, if we take some time to reflect on this, do we realize this, that when you set your mind on the things that are temporal, you actually never get fulfilled? And that's why you keep going back for more. It doesn't quite fit the void that's in us. Now, this ties to the third question, which is this: why are Christians subscribing to worldly wisdom over heavenly wisdom? Not only why are we putting the temporal over the eternal, why are Christians subscribing to worldly wisdom over heavenly wisdom? Colossians 2:8 says, see to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, and not according to Christ. For those of you who've been reading The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Trueman, one of the things that I think he makes a pretty good case for is this: worldly wisdom has so infiltrated the mindset of our culture, and so even if you have never read Rousseau or Marx or Darwin or Freud or the Romantic poets, the thinking and the philosophy of those writers still affects you. You look at our educational system, and you look at the typical person, the average citizen in our country, who has not thought through these things, all these things through. They have not gotten higher education over these things. But they have readily accepted things like transgenderism or LGBTQ, the dismantling of the institution of marriage, and all these things. And they will just simply come to this conclusion and say this: it's acceptable. I don't even know why, but it's just acceptable. Now, we can understand the world saying that, but what's more tragic is that there are those who say they are Christians, and they follow the same trajectory by subscribing to worldly wisdom instead of the wisdom found in God's Word. You know, one of the things that's debated on social media, even by Christians, and you see the process of this debate, is that there is a glaring similarity to worldly argumentation. And instead of a high view of God and his Word, there's a high view of man and human wisdom. In fact, if anything, God and his Word is used as an accessory. Bible verses are employed for their utilitarian benefit, rather than directing people to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. In fact, if anything, I could say that maybe there's a laziness in seeking God's wisdom. And we kind of look at just a meme, an emotionally compelling picture or video, maybe the words of others, rather than the words of Christ, and seeking heavenly wisdom from him. Colossians 3:1 says this: therefore, if you've been raised up with Christ, keep seeking the things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are on earth. For you died, and your life has been hidden with Christ in God. One thing we have to really come to terms with is this: you cannot set your mind on the earth and think that that thinking will honor Christ. Not only that, that kind of thinking will be tied to your conduct, and it will manifest itself in how you live. Turn to James chapter 3, starting from verse 13, you see the contrast between earthly wisdom and heavenly wisdom. It says this: who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good conduct his works in the gentleness of wisdom. Right there you already see a contrast between heavenly wisdom and earthly wisdom. Heavenly wisdom is shown by the good conduct of your works in its gentleness. And you know what? One of the shocking things that we see, especially on social media, is a complete lack of gentleness by Christians. I can understand if you're not a Christian. There's no compelling reason to hold back. And even if you might disagree with someone, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't like it if someone's not gentle with me, so I get upset. And at the same time, I can disregard that I'm not being gentle to someone else. I've shared this many times before, but I've been very convicted in my relationship with Romeo, my dog. I realized dogs are very sensitive. I don't know, for those of you who have dogs, I don't know about cats, but I know dogs. Because his eyes communicate to me. It's so funny, especially the last few weeks. I've become very close to Romeo lately. We've been bonding a lot. And the tone of voice matters. And so I speak to him in a little higher pitch. Hi, Rome. Hi, Romy. Come here, Romy. And I see his ears go back, and he's happy. Opposed to the times where I'm like, Rum. And I see him cower. It's so simple. It's almost like just being able to manipulate someone so easily. In fact, one of the things that we know he doesn't like the word bath. Like, Romy, you want to have a bath? And as soon as he hears it, he walks away. Every time. It's so funny. And so we'll say, he really needs a BATH, because if you just say it inadvertently, he's hurt. He doesn't like it. And that's just a dog. Think about what we do with people. Going on, it says, but if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. This wisdom is not coming down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder in every evil practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruits, without doubting, without hypocrisy, and the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. You see, this passage alone will challenge you to consider, so what kind of wisdom are you pursuing? Earthly wisdom? Well, you'll see where earthly wisdom leads. It leads to bitter jealousy, selfish ambition. It's earthly, natural, demonic. Selfish ambition, there is disorder in every evil practice. That's very easily seen when you look at the world. When worldly wisdom operates, you see a corresponding character to it. And it's manifested in its attitudes and actions. But if you are operating with heavenly wisdom, you see the character that is described: pure, peaceable, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruits, without doubting, without hypocrisy. So that if we understand this, should it not compel us to consider then, how important is it that I take in heavenly wisdom? Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may approve what the will of God is, that which is good and pleasing and perfect. One of the reasons why the sermon is a central part of the Sunday service, also why we have Wednesday Bible study through the Gospel of John, why we discuss the scriptures in small groups, why we have Bible studies for the various affinity groups, all of it is meant to help you cultivate heavenly wisdom so that the truth of God's word will transform your thinking. So that as your mind is transformed, the affections of your heart are transformed. So that your heart would be aligned with God's heart, so that then God's will would become our will. And when we act upon that will, we will make the choices that reflect His will. And His will be consistent with His character and His purposes. Now that's a daily choice. And the only way you're going to be exercising heavenly wisdom is if you're continually taking in the source of heavenly wisdom, which is God's word. Fourth question: how is your ecclesiological quotient? How is your ecclesiological quotient? Now, ecclesiology is a fancy word, just that means the theology of church. And when we think of the idea of church, I think most of us immediately think of church in terms of what we do. Like, we go to church. We do church things. We go to church service. We hang out for church fellowship But before you think about what you do, you need to ask yourself, do you understand what it means to be the church? You see, some people, the reason why they struggle with church is because they'll measure church by how many times I have to do things for church. I know over the years when we planted the various lighthouse churches, and we'd start off with a small group of people, and they would start to say things like, wow, we're doing so many church things. And how many times do we have to come out to church? And church is long. The service is long. There's so many things to do with church. And granted, church should not be just what you're always doing necessarily. Some people can overdo church, for sure. But do you really understand what it means to be the church and what the church represents? You know, a lot of the controversies over the things that are going around are about things like, well, should we meet or should we not meet? You know, is it okay? Should we have all these protocols or should we disregard the protocols? Now, those are questions you should work through. But it doesn't stop there. And this is why I think a lot of people miss the point of why these are challenging times. Why do we meet? And is it important to meet? Even if it's dangerous to meet, should we meet? Now, no one is advocating being reckless and irresponsible. But again, this comes back to then why do we meet? In fact, in countries where it is illegal to meet, it is a crime to meet, should you still meet? In China right now, if you want to legally exercise your religious freedoms, you have to sign a contract and you have to say, I will say these things and I will not say certain things in the church. Then you are free to meet. And some churches do that. Is that how we look at it? There could very well come a time where it will be like that in this country. It will be illegal to meet. And I really wonder, you know, with all the discussions that are taking place today and the disagreements that are taking place, I understand. But there will come a day where it will be illegal to meet. And I wonder if people will still then go to church. Would you be willing to go at the risk of your life? Because there are fellow believers around the world who risk their lives to go fellowship in person with their fellow believers, knowing that they could very well be arrested and even die. In fact, whole churches get burned down with the people in them. And you think, how could that be so? Like, why would the world attack the one group of people that is actually advocating to love and forgive and to care for the needy? Why would you do that? Well, I think we have to understand that there is a greater spiritual battle taking place. You see, if you, like me, follow the news and tomorrow LA County is going to officially be in the red tier, you know what that means? We get to eat indoors. And you can go to movies again. You can go work out at the gym again. And for some people, that's great. I mean, I'm kind of happy to go eat indoors. It's okay. You can be honest about that. I'm looking forward to it. But is that what determines everything about my life? There's so much going on. And that's why I want to ask you, before you just respond to these particular issues, step back. Take a look at your heart, your mind. See how your thoughts and emotions and words and actions, particularly in your understanding of your ecclesiology, your theological understanding of what the church is to be and how the church is to function, does it reflect God's word? Or is it more pragmatic? Your commitment to the local church is really an extension of your commitment to the kingdom of God. So the question is this: do you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness? Or do you seek first the kingdom of man and follow man's righteousness? One of the most telling signs of our times right now is that many in the church have turned the agenda of the church into pursuing the kingdom of man, into pursuing the righteousness of man. You know, that's why the very challenge of social justice, the arguments for that, the reason why in the end it hits a wall is because it takes God out of the picture. You cannot have true justice without God. To try to accomplish justice just in man's domain, apart from God, will never achieve justice. You see, when we talk about things like reparations, equity, all these things, how do you actually accomplish those things and make it last? You never will. Due to man's depravity, the kingdom of this world is fallen. The sinfulness of man's heart is deceitful, desperately wicked. Who can know it? But what is particularly sad is when the church drinks the Kool-Aid of human wisdom, of that which is temporal, and forgets that we are called to be different. Now, what has become very controversial, even here at our church, is that there's a lot of disagreement and contention as to what it even means to gather as a church. Now, I want you to know there can be differences on this. And for those who are joining us online, I don't want you to think that somehow you are just being called out as a second-class citizen on this. But the reality and the impact of what it's doing to us is very real. In other words, like if you were a family and you never spent the time physically together, it will affect you. It will. You might even have good reasons to have some measure of separation, but that separation will affect you. If you only knew all the struggles that are happening in the life of our church, you might think twice before you get upset about certain things and ask yourself, so how do we deal with this? Well, look at the bigger picture of your ecclesiology. Is your ecclesiology more reflective of a human agenda? Or is Christ truly head of this church? And does his will define for us how we do church? His will for the church is our greatest priority. We answer to Jesus Christ, not to the world, not to the government, not to other human authorities or institutions. And you say, John, how can you say that? Well, Scripture says that. Ephesians 1, 22 and 23, and he put all things in subjection under his feet and gave him, Jesus, as head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. Colossians 1, 15 through 18 says this, Jesus, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, for in him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he himself will come to have first place in everything. You see, many of us have attended church, maybe for even all our lives. And during the course of your church experience, what you might have maybe even inadvertently done is created your own ecclesiology, surrounded around your own agenda. So you'll have to ask yourself, is your theology of the church really based on God's word, or is it more reflective of worldly wisdom, human traditions, empty philosophies? You see, if there's one thing that the church really is about, it's not about just this life. The church is meant to prepare you for eternity. And there are practical consequences on how we apply this. Yes, even in the present. But our sights are not set just for this world. Our sight is set on heaven. Just as Jesus said, his kingdom is not of this world. The ultimate agenda of the church is not of this world, but to reflect the kingdom of heaven. I think there are so many churches right now that fall short of being a true church because their agenda is ultimately centered around man, not Christ. Centered on this world, not the kingdom of heaven. And it is being used and manipulated to accomplish worldly goals and purposes instead of the purposes for which Christ has explicitly mandated through the Great Commission, the Great Commandment, in his redemptive plan in the gospel. I'm going to share with you the fifth question, and we're going to have to pick up the rest next time. But this is where there's such a practical aspect of all that I'm talking about. Where is your urgency for the gospel and the Great Commission? Where is your urgency for the gospel and the Great Commission? One of the things that COVID has done is pretty much limit the ability to spend time with people. And so the opportunities, especially to engage with unbelievers, have been minimized, if not even cut out completely. And so we have simply stopped seeking for opportunities to share the gospel. And it could be because we're like, well, you know what? I don't want to expose myself to risky situations, interactions. But if we're really honest, we become lazy. And it's easy to just stop interacting with people, period. Now, across the board, many pastors have acknowledged this, that outreach for the church has essentially died because of COVID. And people will say things like, well, it's kind of awkward trying to talk to someone on Zoom. It's just kind of, we can't get together, and everyone's stressed out. I don't want to add to that stress. Well, some people will say, well, the church should do more. The church should, have some outreach events and things like that. And I'll tell you, one of the big frustrations is this. We can't even get our people to have fellowship together, much less do outreach together. How do we do this? It really has to start with my own heart. There's so much discussion on those who are going to get sick and die from COVID. And it's happening. People are dying. People are getting sick. But COVID is not the main issue. People are dying. And they're dying from many other things too. And they're dying without Christ. Just the other day, we had an extended family member pass away. And we're not sure if they really knew Christ, but they died. And it kind of sobers you, because you realize that a soul has gone into eternity, and if they didn't know Christ, the least important issue is how they died. The biggest issue is that they've entered into eternity without Christ. If we took just as much energy and attention that we give to dealing with COVID as we did to the gospel and sharing the gospel, it would be such a different scenario. In fact, if anything, COVID should heighten the fact that people need the gospel because they are dying. And when they die, are they ready to face eternity? Yes, I am tired of Zoom meetings too. I am tired of not being able to gather with people. I would rather be able to do what we thought was normal before, and who knows when it will be that kind of normal again. But are you concerned to share the gospel? Even so. And before you point out that someone else is not sharing the gospel, please stop and ask yourself, are you sharing the gospel? And what does it mean to share the gospel? It is to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection for sinners. In Romans chapter 10, it says in verse 13, "For whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How will they call on him in whom they have not believed? How will they believe in him whom they have not heard? And how will they hear without a preacher? And how will they preach unless they are sent? Just as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who proclaim good news of good things. However, they did not all heed the good news. For Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed our report? So faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ." You know, when it says, how will they hear without a preacher? That's not talking just about the pastor. The idea of the preacher is the one who simply proclaims the good news, and you and I are all called to do that. How will the gospel get out? It won't get out unless there are preachers who preach the good news. And that's you and me. Our mission statement clearly defines our purpose, which is to make disciples of Christ, which includes the aspect of evangelism. You go, you make disciples, you baptize, you teach them to observe, and that's the whole process. And so when we talk about, is there an urgency for the sense of the gospel? Yes, it includes sharing the gospel to those who are lost, but it's not that alone. It's taking them from there and being concerned about their growth in becoming a follower of Christ. But do we have that burden? Well, we need to pray. If there's one thing we really need to do, we need to pray for this. Marcus Denny, a good friend, missionary friend in the Czech Republic, he says this: "Pray that the Lord will place in your heart, home, and congregation a greater burden for the lost and perishing." When you go home today, will your greatest concern and burden be just for what you're going to have for lunch? Or to take a nap? To catch up on the next episode on Netflix? Or whatever it is? Or is your burden going to be, Lord, there are lost people. I need to share the good news of the gospel of Christ with them. I need to invest my life. I need to call them. I need to spend time letting them know, because they could die tomorrow and enter into eternity condemned. Well, next week I'll finish with the 5 exhortations, and they really kind of build off of these 5 questions. But I do want to ask you to reflect on these things. And not only you yourself individually, but then how do we together as a church respond to all these things? I'm not here just to berate you over this. I'm guilty too. I need to address these issues in my own life too. But I want to ask you, before you get caught up pointing the finger and being critical towards others, even at our own church, how are you answering these questions in your own life? It's a great burden.